Millionaire married a wheelchair bride. For pity he froze when she walked down the aisle. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The night was cold over Manhattan, the kind of chill that seeps through glass and marble. Inside the top floor of the Carter Tower, every surface gleamed under soft golden light. The man standing by the window looked like he owned the city, and he did. Ethan Carter, 34, CEO of Carter Holdings, one of the youngest self-made millionaires in New York. From the outside, his life was perfect. Wealth, power, and reputation. But in that quiet office, his reflection told a different story, one of exhaustion and emptiness. Across the room, his assistant hesitated before speaking. "Sir, the board is still waiting for your response about the merger, and the Charity Foundation is asking if you will attend the gala next week." Ethan exhaled slowly, the skyline flickering in his eyes. "Cancel the gala. Tell the board I will finalize the merger once the press stops talking about my ex." The assistant nodded quickly and left the room. Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey but barely touched it. For months, headlines had followed him everywhere. Carter's fiancée walks away 2 weeks before the wedding. What they did not know was that she had left because of pity. She could not handle his younger sister's condition, could not handle the wheelchair in the family photographs. When the phone buzzed, Ethan almost ignored it, but the caller ID caught his eye. "Dr. Emily Hayes, his sister's physical therapist," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Carter," Emily said gently, "we need to discuss Clara's next phase of recovery. The surgery fund has been approved, but she will need emotional stability and family presence during the therapy." He rubbed his forehead. "She has me. She always has." "With respect, Ethan," the doctor continued, "Clara needs to believe she can stand on her own again. Someone who inspires her hope could help more than any medicine." That sentence lingered long after the call ended. Later that night, as rain tapped softly against the glass, Ethan opened a folder on his desk, an unsigned agreement. A contract marriage. He had written it himself, originally as a corporate stunt, a way to silence rumors and redirect media attention. But now, an idea twisted in his mind. The next morning, at a quiet cafe near Central Park, Ethan sat opposite a young woman with calm eyes and trembling hands. Her name was Lena Ward. She wore a pale blue dress and sat in a sleek black wheelchair. He had met her once before at the foundation's charity drive. She had donated her time teaching art to disabled children. Lena lifted her gaze, wary but steady. "You said you needed to discuss a partnership. I did not expect you meant marriage." Ethan's tone was flat, businesslike. "I will be transparent with you. I need a wife temporarily. Someone respectable, graceful, someone who can help quiet the press and support my sister's recovery. I will make sure you are compensated, your clinic, your rent, your projects, all taken care of." Lena blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. "You are offering money for a marriage?" He nodded. "Think of it as a contract. 6 months, no obligations beyond appearances. You will live at my estate, attend public events, and after that we part ways. You will be financially independent." For a long moment, Lena said nothing. The clatter of coffee cups filled the silence between them. Then she asked softly, "Why me?" Ethan hesitated. "Because you understand dignity. You do not pity people who are different." Her fingers tightened around the rim of her cup. "And what if people think I married you for money?" "Let them think what they want," he said, voice low. "I am used to being judged." Lena looked out the window. Snow had started to fall, soft and soundless. She thought of the medical bills piling up from her younger brother's therapy, the deadlines she had missed, the nights she had stayed up painting to pay rent. The offer was outrageous, but it could save her family. Finally, she turned back to him. "I have conditions," she said. "No physical contact, no pretending in private, and you will not interfere with my work at the art center." Ethan's expression did not change, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. Agreed. He slid the contract toward her, his pen glinting under the light. As she signed her name, Lena Ward, the world outside the cafe seemed to fade. Neither of them knew that this paper, written in ink and pride, would be the very thing that would test their hearts beyond what either had bargained for. And that was how their story began, a marriage born from pity, destined to reveal what true strength really looks like. The morning after the agreement, the world outside Ethan's penthouse was wrapped in soft gray light. Snow fell quietly over the city, muting the usual noise of Manhattan. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and expensive wood polish. Lena sat at the edge of a large velvet sofa, her hands resting on her lap. She looked small against the wide marble floors and towering windows. Everything in the Carter estate seemed designed to remind her that she did not belong here. Ethan entered the room dressed in a dark, tailored suit, every button perfectly aligned. "Good morning," he said. His tone was polite, distant. "Claire will show you around the house. Tonight there is a board dinner. You will attend as my wife." Lena nodded slowly. "Understood." Claire, the housekeeper, appeared with a gentle smile and began explaining the routines, schedules, and endless corridors. When they reached the guest wing that had now become her room, Lena's eyes widened. The space was larger than her entire apartment. The walls were painted ivory, the bed dressed in silk sheets, a single vase of white lilies on the side table. "This was designed for family," Claire said softly. "Mr. Carter has not used this part of the house since his parents passed." "Oh." Lena ran her fingertips along the carved headboard. "It feels lonely." The housekeeper gave a faint smile. "You might be right." Hours later, Lena found herself in front of a mirror as Claire adjusted the sleeve of her dress. The gown was elegant but simple, a deep emerald color that made her eyes seem brighter. She was not used to luxury, and every glance in the mirror felt like looking at a stranger. Ethan appeared behind her reflection. "Perfect," he said quietly. "You look exactly as the world expects Mrs. Carter to look." "Except for the wheelchair," she replied, her tone even. He hesitated for a moment. "The wheelchair does not define you. Confidence does." She met his eyes through the mirror. "Then you should try believing that too." That evening, the board dinner took place at the Carter Tower Ballroom. The space shimmered with crystal chandeliers and chatter in expensive suits. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. Ethan moved through the crowd with effortless control, his hand resting lightly on the back of Lena's chair as they greeted investors and partners. When one of the executives, an older man with a forced smile, leaned forward and said, "Mr. Carter, quite the noble gesture marrying someone so courageous." The table fell silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You mean marrying a woman who has more integrity than most of this room?" The man's smirk faded. Lena lowered her gaze, cheeks warm, not from shame but from the unexpected defense. Later, when the speeches ended and the crowd drifted toward the bar, she whispered, "You did not have to say that." He shrugged. "I did not do it for you. I did it because I am tired of people mistaking kindness for charity." For the first time that night, she smiled. It was small, fleeting, but it softened the air between them. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to intertwine in quiet, unspoken ways. Lena spent her mornings at the Foundation's Art Center, teaching painting to children recovering from spinal injuries. In the evenings, she returned to the mansion, where Ethan often worked late in his office, surrounded by files and the faint hum of the city below. Sometimes, she would bring him coffee. Sometimes, he would forget to thank her, but his eyes would linger a second too long when she left the room. One night, near midnight, Lena passed by the music room and heard faint piano notes. She stopped at the doorway. Ethan sat at the grand piano, his fingers moving hesitantly across the keys. The melody was slow, full of sorrow. He had not noticed her. "That is beautiful," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "Old habit. My mother used to play." "Then you must miss her." He nodded, staring at the piano. "Every day." Lena rolled closer, the wheels moving soundlessly across the carpet. "You know," she said, "music only hurts when we stop listening. Maybe that is why you play, so you do not forget." Ethan looked at her for a long time before replying. "You sound like someone who understands loss." "I do," she whispered, "but I learned that pain can be used to paint something new." He smiled faintly, and for a brief moment, the distance between them vanished. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock and the slow fall of snow outside the window. As days turned into weeks, the boundaries of their contract began to blur. Ethan found himself checking the time when she was late returning home. He noticed her laughter with the staff. the way she encouraged Clara during therapy sessions. The more he saw her resilience, the more the word pity began to sound like a lie. But he never said it aloud. Instead, he buried the thought behind reports and deadlines, pretending that nothing had changed. Until one morning, Clara called him into the therapy room. The sun was streaming through the tall windows, and Lena stood beside Clara's wheelchair, holding her hands. "Watch this," Clara said. Slowly, shakily, she rose to her feet, balancing on trembling legs. Ethan froze. The same wordless shock ran through him as when he had seen Lena the first time. But this time, it was hope that filled his chest. Clara laughed, tears in her eyes, and threw her arms around Lena. "She did it," Lena said, smiling. "Your sister is standing." Ethan's voice caught. How did you make her believe she could?" Lena looked at him gently. "I did not make her believe. I showed her that it was possible." He realized then that this woman he had married for appearance, for control, for pity was the only one teaching him what strength truly meant. And as snow fell again that evening, Ethan Carter understood something he had never expected. For the first time in years, he did not feel empty. He felt alive. Winter slowly melted into spring, but inside the Carter estate, the change felt deeper than seasons. What had begun as a contract built on convenience had turned into something both fragile and undeniable. Ethan had started looking forward to the soft clatter of Lena's wheelchair in the hallway, to the quiet hum of her humming when she painted in the solarium, to the small things that made the house feel alive again. One evening, after returning from a long board meeting, he found her sitting near the grand window, sketching the skyline. The late sunset painted her face in gold and rose. She looked peaceful, almost radiant. He stood there for a moment before speaking. "You could have sold your art long ago. Why teach instead of build a career?" Lena did not look up. "Because teaching reminds me that what we give away often matters more than what we keep." She paused, turning her pencil between her fingers. "And because it makes me feel free." "Free," he repeated, his voice soft. "That must feel nice." She smiled faintly. "You could try it sometime." Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the weight of their contract vanished. There was only the quiet rhythm of two people beginning to see each other differently. But outside that peace, the world was beginning to whisper again. A business rival, Daniel Reeves, had been digging into Ethan's personal life for weeks. When the first photograph appeared on a gossip site, a shot of Ethan pushing Lena's wheelchair down the steps of a charity gala, the headline read, "Billionaires, Sympathy, Marriage, True Love, or Public Stunt." Within hours, the story spread across every major outlet. By the next morning, the Carter Tower lobby was filled with reporters. Ethan's phone vibrated nonstop. Claire tried to shield Lena from the chaos, but by noon, her name was everywhere. Ethan called an emergency meeting with his board. His tone was sharp, clipped, every word heavy with restrained anger. "We will not entertain this circus. The foundation continues as planned, the merger goes forward, and no one will mention my wife again." A senior investor cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Mr. Carter, this situation is affecting stock confidence. People are saying she married you for the money. Some even question if she is truly—" "Stop," Ethan's voice cut through the room. "If anyone in this building questions her integrity again, they can clear their desk before sunset." He left the room before anyone could respond. When he arrived home that night, the lights in Lena's studio were off. The smell of turpentine and paint lingered in the air. On the easel stood an unfinished canvas, half a city skyline, half a storm. She was on the terrace, staring at the dark horizon. "Ethan," she said without turning, "you do not have to defend me to them." "I am your husband," he replied. "That is exactly what I am supposed to do." She faced him now, eyes clear but sad. "No, you are my husband on paper. We made a deal, remember? You do not have to fight battles that are not real." His chest tightened. "Do you really think none of this has become real?" Silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint hum of the city below. Finally, she said, "What do you want me to think, Ethan? That a man who signed a contract for companionship suddenly believes in love?" He took a step closer. "I am not sure what I believe anymore, but I know that when people insult you, it feels personal. That is not part of the contract." Lena's hands trembled slightly on the arms of her chair. "I did not want to become your scandal. I only wanted to help Clara, to give her courage." "You did more than that," he said quietly. "You gave it to me too." Her lips parted, But before she could answer, a flash exploded from beyond the terrace fence, a photographer hiding in the garden. Ethan's temper snapped. He stormed toward the intruder, but by the time security arrived, the man was gone. The next morning, the headlines were worse. Contract marriage confirmed. Insider claims paperwork signed months before wedding. Someone had leaked the documents. Every word, every clause that defined their marriage as business now lay bare for the public. Ethan confronted his legal advisor, who admitted that Daniel Reeves's assistant had bribed a staff member. The betrayal burned like acid. By midday, the story was everywhere. Lena stopped answering calls. She locked herself in her room, overwhelmed by messages calling her a fraud. Ethan stood outside her door, listening to the faint sound of her crying. "Lena," he said through the door, "please, open up." When she finally did, her eyes were red but steady. "You have to let me go," she whispered. "This was supposed to be temporary. Now it is destroying everything you built." "I do not care about the company," he said. "I care about you." She shook her head. "You care because you feel guilty, because you started this with pity, and you do not know how to end it differently." He tried to reach for her, but she rolled back slightly, the motion deliberate, final. "You need to fix your name, Ethan, and I need to find mine again." Within days, she was gone. The guest room stood empty, her art supplies packed neatly into boxes. Only one thing remained on the easel, a finished painting of a figure standing in the rain, head tilted toward the light, no wheelchair in sight. Ethan stared at it for a long time, realizing she had painted not what she was, but what she hoped to become. For the first time since she entered his life, the Carter estate felt colder than winter, and as the days passed without her laughter echoing down the hall, Ethan Carter began to understand that every empire he had ever built meant nothing compared to the woman who had walked into his life to teach him how to feel again. He had once married her out of pity. Now, he could not breathe without her. Weeks passed, but time did not move for Ethan Carter. The mansion had grown unbearably silent. Every corridor echoed with what was missing: her voice, her laughter, the soft hum of her wheels against the marble floors. He threw himself into work, but the numbers on the screen no longer made sense. Meetings blurred together. His board watched quietly as their once calm leader began to unravel. One late evening, while reviewing reports in his office, Ethan's assistant entered hesitantly. "Sir, the merger has been postponed again. Investors are nervous. They think the scandal has damaged your credibility." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Let them think what they want." The assistant lingered. "There is something else. The Carter Foundation sent an invitation to tomorrow's charity auction. It is hosted by the rehabilitation center where Mrs. Carter used to work. She will be there." "Ugh." Ethan looked up slowly, the words cut through the fog in his mind. "She is speaking publicly?" "Yes, sir. She is presenting her art project for disabled children. They say it is her first appearance since she left." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something alive inside his chest, hope and fear tangled together. That night, he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her turning away, her voice trembling when she said, "You started this with pity." The next evening, he arrived at the auction unannounced. The room was filled with reporters, donors, and doctors. On stage, Lena sat beneath a warm spotlight, her hands steady as she spoke about her students' courage and how art gave them a sense of motion even when their bodies refused to move. Behind her stood a series of paintings created by children from the center, colorful, alive, filled with hope. Ethan stayed near the back, hidden in the crowd. When Lena unveiled her own painting, the room fell silent. It was titled Freedom. The canvas showed a woman standing on a bridge, her wheelchair behind her, her face lifted toward the dawn. Lena's voice was clear and calm. "People often think strength means never falling. But real strength," she said, "is believing you can rise again, even when the world calls you broken." Applause thundered across the hall. Ethan felt something tighten in his throat. Before he could move, Daniel Reeves appeared beside him, smiling with mock sympathy. "Beautiful speech, was it not? Too bad the world still thinks she married you for fame." Ethan turned, his voice low but steady. "You leaked our contract." Daniel smirked. "Business, Ethan. Nothing personal." Ethan's hand clenched, but instead of anger, a calm clarity filled him. "You are wrong," he said. "Everything about this is personal." He walked away, leaving the man speechless. When the event ended, Lena was preparing to leave through a side exit. She froze when she saw him waiting by the door. He looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes, something humble, almost raw. "Why are you here?" she asked softly. "I came to see you," he said, "and to tell you I am sorry, not because of the scandal, not because of the board, but because I forgot that love is not a transaction." She exhaled slowly, unsure whether to believe him. "You do not owe me words, Ethan." He shook his head. "I owe you truth. When I asked you to marry me, I did it to protect my image. But you gave me something I never deserved, grace. You changed my sister's life, and mine. And when the world mocked us, I did the one thing I swore I would never do again. I stayed silent." Lena looked at him, her eyes glistening. Silence can hurt more than lies. "I know," he said quietly. "That is why I am done being silent." He took a step back, allowing space between them. "Tomorrow, I am calling a press conference. I will tell them everything that I started this marriage as a contract, and that I ended up falling in love with the woman I was supposed to protect." The room behind them buzzed with the fading sounds of the auction, but in that moment, it felt as if time had stopped. Lena's voice trembled. "You will destroy your reputation," he smiled faintly. "Maybe, but at least it will be real this time." "Oh," she stared at him, speechless, as he turned and walked into the night, and for the first time, she did not feel pity or anger, only the quiet ache of something honest returning. The next morning, the world seemed to hold its breath. Every major news outlet carried the same headline: "Ethan Carter to hold emergency press conference at noon." The speculation was endless. Some said he would resign. Others believed he would announce a new merger. No one expected what he was about to say. At exactly 12 o'clock, Ethan stepped onto the stage in front of the flashing cameras. There was no entourage, no publicist, no carefully prepared speech, only him, the microphone, and the truth. He began simply. "6 months ago, I made a decision that I believed would solve my problems. I proposed a marriage that was not built on love, but on convenience. I wanted to silence rumors and protect my company. The woman I married agreed under clear terms, and I told myself it was business." He paused, his voice steady but heavy. "But what I found was something no contract could define." Reporters murmured as he continued. "Her name is Lena Ward. She taught art to children who could not walk, yet she carried more grace and strength than anyone I have ever met. I called it pity, she called it purpose, and she changed my life." The room fell silent. Ethan looked straight into the cameras. "Yes, the marriage began as an agreement, but it became real the moment she showed my sister how to stand, and showed me what it means to live with honesty. So, if you want a headline, here it is. Ethan Carter married for the wrong reason and learned the right one too late." He stepped away from the podium without answering a single question. By the time he reached his car, his phone was exploding with calls, messages, and investor alerts. He ignored them all. For the first time in years, he did not care about reputation or profit. He only cared about finding her. Lena was at the rehabilitation center, packing up supplies after class when the news broadcast played on the small television in the corner. The anchor's voice trembled slightly as she repeated his confession. In a shocking statement, millionaire Ethan Carter admitted his marriage was contractual but declared his love publicly. Lena froze, the paintbrush falling from her hand. Around her, the nurses whispered in disbelief. Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them quickly, whispering to herself, "You foolish man." That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, she wheeled herself out into the hospital garden. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wet earth and spring flowers. A familiar voice broke the quiet. "You said once that music only hurts when we stop listening." She turned. Ethan stood a few feet away. No cameras, no guards, only sincerity in his eyes. He stepped closer, kneeling so they were face to face. "I am listening now, Lena. To you." Her voice shook. "Why would you risk everything for me?" "Because everything meant nothing without you," he said softly. For a long time, they said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out her hand. Ethan took it, his fingers trembling around hers. The silence between them was no longer empty, it was full of everything they had left unsaid. And as the last light of day faded behind the skyline, Ethan Carter knew he had finally done something real. Not for business, not for pride, but for love. The wedding took place quietly at the same rehabilitation center where their story had begun. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, No extravagant decorations, just family, close friends, and the sound of soft piano music playing in the background. The air smelled of lilacs and spring rain, and sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting everything in gold. Lena wore a simple white dress, her hair loosely pinned, a few strands falling against her cheeks. When she entered the hall, the guests rose to their feet. She moved forward slowly, her wheelchair rolling along the aisle that had been lined with rose petals. Ethan stood waiting at the altar, his heart pounding as if this were the first time he had ever seen her. When she reached him, she smiled. "You promised no contracts this time," he smiled back. "Just vows." The officiant began the ceremony, but the words faded into the background as they looked at each other. Everything around them, the whispers, the soft music, the world seemed to fall away. When it was time for their vows, Ethan spoke first. "You once told me that real strength is believing you can rise again. You showed me that love is not about control, it is about courage. I promise to never let silence stand between us again." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "And I promise," she said softly, "to remind you that kindness is not weakness, and that even when we fall, we rise stronger together." There was a hush as the officiant declared, "You may now kiss your bride." Ethan bent slightly, and Lena reached up, pulling him closer. The applause that followed was not loud but heartfelt. Every person in that room had witnessed something pure. Later, as the guests drifted outside for photographs, Ethan wheeled Lena to the terrace overlooking the garden. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and for a long moment, they said nothing. He took her hand, his voice gentle. "I used to think love was a weakness that distracted people from success. But now I know it is the only thing that gives success meaning." Lena smiled. "And I used to think pity was the opposite of dignity. But you proved that compassion, when honest, can heal." They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, the light fading but their promise unshaken. Their first marriage had been written in ink and pride, but this one was written in truth and it would last. Months later, the Carter Rehabilitation Art Center officially opened its doors. The building stood at the edge of Central Park, sunlight reflecting off its glass facade. On the front wall, a plaque read, "Founded by Ethan and Lena Carter for those learning to stand again." The opening ceremony drew hundreds of guests, patients, doctors, families, and supporters. Ethan stood beside Lena at the entrance, both of them smiling as children in wheelchairs rolled past, carrying paintbrushes and laughter. Clara, now walking on her own with a light brace, joined them and whispered, "She would be proud of you, Ethan. Mom would have loved this." He nodded, his eyes soft. "I think she is watching." When Lena took the stage to speak, her voice was steady and warm. This center was not built from money, it was built from second chances. Because healing is not just about moving your body, it is about believing you still have purpose. The crowd applauded, and Ethan looked at her with quiet admiration. He had spent years chasing numbers, but today, he saw what real legacy meant. After the ceremony, as the evening light settled over the park, Ethan wheeled Lena to the mural wall where the children had painted a message together. In bright colors it read, "Love heals." Lena smiled, her eyes glistening. "They understand more than most adults ever will." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe because they have already learned that strength and kindness are the same thing." The two of them sat in silence as the city lights came on, the sound of laughter echoing around them. For once, there was no audience, no pretense, only peace. A year later, spring returned to New York, gentle and bright. The Carter Rehabilitation Art Center had become a landmark of hope. Photographs of smiling children lined the entrance hall, and every wall carried a piece of art that told a story of recovery. But the one painting that everyone stopped to look at hung in the main corridor, a portrait of a woman standing beneath a sunrise, her wheelchair left behind. The plaque beneath it simply read, "Freedom by Lena Carter." Ethan walked through the corridor that morning, carrying a cup of coffee for his wife. He found her in the courtyard, sunlight resting on her shoulders as she guided a young patient's brush across a canvas. The boy laughed, and Lena joined him, the sound soft and full of life. When she saw Ethan, her smile widened. "You are late," she said playfully. He set the cup beside her. "I was distracted," he replied. "Every time I walk through those halls, I remember how far we have come." She looked around, her expression tender. "You mean how far they have come?" He shook his head. "No, Lena. I mean how far you have taken me." The boy finished his painting and rolled away toward the others. Ethan sat beside Lena on the bench, the morning breeze carrying the scent of fresh flowers. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" he asked. She laughed softly. "The day you offered me a contract instead of a coffee?" He smiled. "Yes, that one. I was a fool who thought love could be negotiated." Lena turned to him, her eyes bright. "And I was a woman who thought love was not meant for someone like me. But we both learned, did we not?" He nodded. "That love is not a contract to sign, but a choice to keep." She reached out her hand, and he took it, their fingers intertwining with ease. For a long time, they sat in quiet contentment, watching the students paint under the golden Sunday. In that moment, Ethan realized something simple yet profound. He had built empires, lost fortunes, and reclaimed his name, but none of it compared to this. Not the wealth, not the applause, not the power. Just this one woman, one promise, and a life finally lived with truth. As the wind moved through the courtyard, Lena leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "For all the wrong reasons we began, Ethan, I am grateful we found the right ending." "Oh." He smiled, his voice a quiet echo of peace. "So am I." And beneath the bright sky of another New York spring, the man who once married for pity now lived for love, proving that the truest vows are written not on paper, but in the heart.